right, so you wanted to deep dive into the Abkhazian presidential elections.
Yeah,
And man, what a first round, huh?
really was.
Straight to a runoff. I've got 3 sources here.
Okay.
One breaks down the results. We've got an observer report and a whole profile on the candidates. And to help us untangle all of this,
Yeah.
we've got an expert in all things Abkhazia politics joining us.
Happy to be here.
Now, I know you follow this region closely.
I do.
So what really jumps out at you just from looking at these initial numbers?
Well, I think what's fascinating is that neither candidate managed to secure a majority in the first round.
Right.
Badra Gunba, the current vice president, he came close, 46.38%.
Yeah?
But his rival, Adgur Ardzinba, he's trailing but not that far behind
Yeah.
at 36.92%. So
Less than 10 points.
exactly. A gap that, while significant, isn't insurmountable.
No, not at all. This is practically screaming for a second round.
It is.
But before we even get into like what that means going forward,
Sure.
I kind of want to talk about the overall legitimacy of a process.
Okay.
We've got these reports from international observers.
Right.
Any red flags?
It's interesting. The observers pretty much gave it a thumbs up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they didn't find any major irregularities
Not-
that would have, skewed the results in a significant way. There's even a funny little anecdote
Okay.
about a Tunisian observer
Okay.
who was initially stopped from taking a picture of the vote count protocol,
Oh, wow.
but after he got in touch with the Central Election Commission, they let him do it.
So they were aiming for transparency,
Yeah, I think it's a small detail, but it sort of highlights that they were at least
trying to be open.
trying, yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like we've got a level playing field.
So far,
But let's talk about the players themselves.
all right.
For those who might need a quick refresher,
Sure.
who are the 2 front runners we're looking at going into this runoff?
Okay, so on the one side, you've got Badra Gunba, the incumbent vice president.
Yeah.
Very much giving those establishment vibes. He's got a PhD in economics,
Yeah.
history, and various governmental roles. He really represents a continuation
Of the current.
of the current path, yeah.
Okay.
And then you have Adgur Ardzinba,
Yeah.
who's running as the opposition. And he's really leaning into this message of change,
Right.
framing the election as a fight for a stronger, more independent Abkhazia.
So it's that classic experience versus change dynamic.
It seems to be shaping up that way.
But, I mean, if neither of them got a majority,
Right.
that means a pretty sizable chunk of the electorate wasn't really represented in that first round.
Absolutely. You've got a significant 30% of eligible voters who didn't cast a ballot in the first round.
30%, that's not just like a silent minority. That's a potential game changer.
It is. And that's a huge pool of what you might call indifferent voters
Yeah.
who could really swing this runoff.
What do we know about them? Like, what might motivate them to either participate or not participate in this next round?
Well, that's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, our sources are a little quiet on their motivations.
Right.
But I'm sure Gunba and Ardzinba, they're aware of this group, right?
Right.
So I think we can expect them to both try and tailor their campaigns to capture this group,
Oh, yeah.
to try and appeal to people who hasn't really found a reason to vote yet,
Right.
focus on issues that resonate with them.
So they're the wild card in all of this.
Very much so.
Speaking of Ardzinba,
Yeah.
his statement after the first round,
Oh, yes.
this is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
He started off by thanking his supporters.
He did, particularly the ones from the diaspora who
Yeah.
had faced some difficulties returning to vote.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he even mentioned an incident in Turkey where some polling stations were closed,
Oh, wow.
which prevented
That's a big deal.
Yeah, which prevented some members of the diaspora from actually casting their ballots.
Okay.
So he's pledged to investigate this further, but it definitely raises questions about how accessible
Yeah, for sure.
the vote was for those outside of Abkhazia.
So it kind of feels like he's maybe trying to tap into some of the dissatisfaction with the current political climate,
Yeah.
maybe using this incident to try and galvanize those who feel disenfranchised.
Precisely. He went on to criticize the status quo,
Yeah.
promising a strong, independent, and prosperous Abkhazia if he gets elected.
Okay.
A clear appeal to those seeking a departure.
From the Fur administration.
Exactly.
Okay.
He even directly addressed those who chose against all in the first round.
Oh, really?
Yeah, positioning them as potential allies
Interesting.
in this sort of fight for change.
So he's building a coalition.
Absolutely, he's trying.
Okay. But we can't forget Gumbo still has that lead from the first round.
He does.
So I doubt he's just going to sit back and let Ardzinba catch up.
I don't think so either, but what's really interesting is that despite, being the incumbent, having those resources, he couldn't get that first round win.
Huh.
And I think that suggests a deeper level of dissatisfaction than maybe we originally thought.
So this isn't just a tight race.
No.
This is people wanting something different.
I think it could be, yeah. And this is where Ardzinba's message might find fertile ground.
Yeah.
But his team, they need to mobilize those voters, the ones we were talking about.
Those are different voters.
Exactly. They need to convince them that he's the one who can deliver on that promise of a new Abkhazia.
It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
It is.
I'm excited for the second round.
Me too.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick break.
Okay.
So it seems like we've got ourselves a real political thriller here.
It does.
A close race.
Yeah.
Tons of undecided voters.
Right.
Two guys with very different ideas for what Abkhazia should look like.
Absolutely.
But let's go back to those first-round results for a sec.
Okay.
We know Gunba and Ardzinba were way ahead.
Yeah.
But there were other candidates too, right?
There were, yeah.
Like, what happened to them?
Well, they didn't get enough to make it to the runoff, obviously.
Okay.
But they still represent a part of what Abkhazian voters are thinking.
Yeah.
Robert Arshba got a decent chunk, 7.53%.
Okay.
Then you've got Oleg Bartsits at 4.04%.
Right.
And Adgur Ardzinba with 0.91%.
Right.
And then, of course, you've got those 1,313 votes that were against all.
Yeah, that against all categories.
Yeah.
It always tells its own story.
It does.
Like, there's a group of people who are just not happy with any of the options.
Exactly. It's a good reminder that an election isn't just about the top two.
No.
It's about all these different views and priorities within a society.
Yeah.
The fact that these other guys got votes and that against all option,
Yeah.
it adds a layer of complexity that we don't always see.
Okay, so how do those other candidates and that against all vote play into this second round?
Right.
Like, can Ardzinba realistically get those people to vote for him?
Well, it's going to be tough for him.
Yeah.
I mean, he's trying to be the change candidate.
Right.
But we don't know if the folks who voted for those other guys agree with his specific vision.
Right.
Convincing them to switch sides, it's going to take a lot of work.
So he can't just rely on that general message of change?
No, he's got to figure out what those specific groups cared about in the first place.
Right, like what issues mattered to them.
Exactly, and tailor his approach.
He's basically starting a new campaign.
Yeah, pretty much, but with even more pressure.
And this is where understanding those different groups of voters really comes in.
Absolutely.
You know, figuring out why they made the choices they did.
Yeah, what are they hoping for? What are they worried about?
Yeah.
Answering those questions is key.
It sounds like both these guys have a lot of work to do.
They do.
Gunba needs to make sure his people stick with him.
Right.
And Ardzinba has to bring in new voters.
Plus, get those people who are disillusioned to come back.
Oh yeah, the folks who just didn't bother voting last time?
Right, they could change everything.
They really hold the power here.
Yeah, whoever can figure out how to motivate them, how to tap into what they care about.
They'll probably win.
Probably, yeah. This is getting really interesting.
It is.
Like a real showdown.
Yeah, a clash of ideologies, a battle for what Abkhazia is going to be.
Exactly. The stakes are high.
And the choices that people make in the next few weeks.
They're going to have a real impact on the future.
Yeah, this isn't just some internal thing.
No. The outcome of this election.
It's going to have ripple effects.
Way beyond Abkhazia's border.
Especially given all the complex stuff going on in the Caucasus.
Oh, absolutely.
A choice between Gunba and Ardzinba.
Yeah.
It matters to the whole region.
To the neighbors.
And to the wider international community, too.
Absolutely. We've been focused on what's happening inside Abkhazia.
Right.
But it's important to remember that this is part of a much bigger story.
Yeah, a story that's still being written.
Exactly.
And the Abkhazian people, they're the ones holding the pen.
They are.
Okay, so we've gone over a lot here.
Yeah.
Those super close results.
Yeah.
All those people who didn't vote the first time around.
Right.
And how this election could impact way more than just Abkhazia.
It really could.
But I want to bring it back to you, our listener.
Okay.
What do you think is the biggest takeaway from all of this?
You know, for me, it's the choice that the Abkhazian people are facing.
Yeah.
It's a big one. It's not just picking a president. It's about the direction of their whole country.
Right.
Do they want things to stay the same with Gunba, or do they want that change that Ardzinba's talking about?
It's like they're standing at a fork in the road.
Exactly.
And each path leads somewhere totally different.
And that's why I think it's so important to really think about all this. Don't just take our word for it.
Right.
Look at the candidates, what they stand for, what they've done.
What their plans are.
Exactly.
Do your own research. You know.
Absolutely. And form your own opinion.
Because this election, it could change everything.
Oh, yeah. The political landscape of Abkhazia could be completely different.
Yeah.
And like we were saying, those changes could spread.
To the whole Caucasus region.
Rest, the whole world is watching.
Well, this small republic figures out its identity, its independence, its place in the world.
Big questions.
So, as we head into this second round, I want to leave you with this. The Abkhazian people are making history.
With every vote.
And while we can't know what will happen, we can understand what's happening right now.
Right.
And how important this moment is. So stay informed, stay curious, and stay engaged. That's it for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us.